Hey everyone, Stephen here with Tiffany from the Deep Dive Podcast.
Firstly, we want to say thank you for listening, watching, commenting, and diving into these conversations with us each week.
I see those comments coming in. Someone out there called me Uncle. That's all right. Uncle Steve is here to stay.
Well, honestly, one of the best parts of doing this podcast is getting to know what you care about. And now we want to know you even better.
Yeah, what keeps you coming back to Deep Dive? Is it the topics we cover, the guests we bring on, or...
Is it just us?
I think we know the answer. It's probably us.
We also want to know what you want more of. Should we go deeper into the bread and butter issues?
Or do you want us to unpack more of what is happening around the world?
And that's why we are running a deep dive audience survey. It will take only a few minutes and your feedback will help us shape future episodes.
So do take part. It's going to take you just a short while. And the bonus is 10 lucky participants will each receive a $50 Grab voucher. You can find the survey link right here.
Thanks again for being part of the Deep Dive community. Now on with the program.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Tiffany and myself, Stephen.
Steve,
Yes.
Ukraine, Gaza, Iran.
Okay.
So I'm talking about these things because these conflicts often feel very far away, right? But in our digitally connected age, often we see a lot of these, images on our social media feeds,
Correct.
on our phones. So every conflict, I feel, raises the same question for all of us back home, which is how ready is Singapore in an increasingly unstable world?
Yeah, there's been so much happening in the world, and we do think, how can we manage? We're so small. We've got a small military. Do we have enough to keep us safe? What will it take? But in the world today, is defense all about just the hardware, or are we looking also at the software, diplomacy, a lot of many other things along the way before we get to actually fighting on the ground?
That's right. So I think we want to unpack a lot of these questions today. And to answer all of this, we have with us a very special guest, and he's none other than our Minister for Defence, Mr. Chun Sing.
Thank you for having me again.
I mean, you've been here several times. In fact, you were last year as I think you were education minister still at the time. So now that you're defense minister, how's it feel? Has life changed for you?
Not really. I grew up in the defense establishment. The next year will be my 40th year. So it's good.
But what has been the biggest adjustment so far on the personal front, moving portfolios?
There are similarities and differences. The similarity between defense and education is that both of them deals with what we call long cycle issues. Because whatever you do today, you're unlikely to see the outcome till perhaps 10, 20 years later. It's like in education, right? People ask, so how do you know whether you are successful as an education minister? And you can never really answer that until you see the kids grow up and say that, wow, okay, they are independent, they are resilient, and so on and so forth. And likewise in defense, you will never really know the results until maybe 5, 10, 20 years later.
Okay.
But one big difference is that in education, you kind of let everybody know whatever you are doing, and you want people to know what you are doing. In defense, we pride ourselves of not really wanting to let people know what we are doing, and that's for good reasons, right?
Of course.
But that is also our dilemma. The good reason being that, of course, you don't want your potential adversaries to know all the stuff that you have, all the operational plans that you have, and you want to keep them quiet.
Yeah.
You don't want to excite people and trigger them to go and take counter actions, right? So that's the part about why we try not to tell everybody everything. But therein lies the biggest dilemma in defense. How do you maintain confidence in our people? How do you deter people without having to tell people everything?
Yeah, it's almost like you got to know how much to tell, how much to not tell.
Yeah.
And when you let them know about certain things, you have a reason for wanting them to know about it.
Yeah. So whenever we show something new, there's usually a reason why we show, but we want to show it at the time of our choosing. But in order to show it at the time of our choosing, that requires many years of preparations. People talk about drones now, right?
Okay.
You talk about Ukraine, Gaza, you talk about Iran, and everybody likes to talk about drones. But drones is not something new. I was working on some of these issues 25 years ago when I was in the service. 10 years ago, at the National Day Parade, we had already a drone show. And for what we call the informed observers, we would know that if you can synchronize 300 drones in the sky, making a heart shape, you can do that with many other things.
Yeah.
And actually, we've seen that recently in the recent conflict where drones were used as attack weapons, So I guess the question is, moving forward, how do we look at this? Because you mentioned Shangri-La dialogue, how it's a bit like being in the airport. You're there to make connections, to talk to each other. But sometimes flights get delayed, cancelled, you lose your baggage. So, I mean, you may make those connections, but does it really mean anything? Or does all the real stuff happen behind the scenes in a conversation like this, for example?
Well, some things never change in defense and security, which is that you can't just talk and have no capabilities. If you have no capabilities, nobody's going to talk to you. And nobody's going to talk to you nicely. But you have capabilities and you don't talk to people, it causes a lot of suspicions. And then people might be wondering what you're up to. And if people are suspicious of each other, what you do to make yourself feel more secure will make the other guy feel less secure. And you start taking actions. So it's like what I say, Newton's third law. Every action has a reaction opposite in direction. So now the question is, how do you combine both? So in Shangri-La is a defense diplomacy at work. And what's the most important thing is to understand people deeply behind the scene to ascertain the intentions. Not just the capabilities, the intention. Because you can have capabilities, but it is your intention that matters. So how do we build up that repertoire of skill sets as a team to understand people deeply? So it's not just that 1 hour conversation or half an hour conversation. Some of these relationships take years to build up. So for example, if I meet Steve for the first time, I have a half an hour conversation with you, I would draw certain conclusions, but I have no baseline whatsoever of who is Steve and what is Steve thinking about. But if I have known Steve for 30 years, it's a different baseline. So some of the relationships that we have goes back to 10, 20, 30 years. And it gives you a certain baseline to understand one another. It also gives you a basis to build on those trust relationship that you have been working on. So for example, like my counterpart in Indonesia, Pak Shafri Samsudin, we have known each other for more than 30 years. As officers together in uniform, as Deputy Defense Minister, and now as Defense Ministers together. It's a different kind of rapport. It's a different kind of understanding. It doesn't mean that there are no issues to be resolved, but even if there are issues to be resolved, there is a certain basis. Now, when it comes to big powers, whether it's China, US, it's all the more important for us to have our, if you like, feel the pulse of what's happening. I mean, in this Shangri-La dialogue, it's quite obvious to people that there's a shift in the US-China approach to one another. And I think because of that shifts, everybody have to do their calculations as what does it mean for them. Right. So these are all very important things to, if you like, secure the peace and try not to end up with the last resort where force has to be used. So this is all very important. So for the practitioners in this field, in the defense and security fields, it takes a lot of investments.
So it's really about relationships, actually. It's people skills. You're building that, that connection.
Yeah, because
And
it sounds
time.
like
It
sounds like at the end of the day, defense diplomacy is also a lot of the backroom stuff, right? It's a lot of the chats, the negotiations. The hard work is done through, I don't know, Telegram, WhatsApp messages. Is that how it's done?
No, there's a lot of backroom stuff. We used to, and we still do, pride ourselves that, if we don't make the headlines, it's a successful day.
Right.
Because the last thing you want is to make the headlines and for the wrong reasons.
Right.
And many of the things that we discuss will not manifest itself in the next few days, weeks. It's not like those that are chasing the news cycle. You will be putting in place mechanisms that hopefully avert conflicts or misunderstanding in years to come. So like, for example, if we are dealing with the Chinese or the Americans, how do we make a value proposition to others to say that, well, we can be relevant, we understand your needs, and we can be a partner, right? And you can do that bilaterally, but in a very complex world where people may not agree with one another, how do we maintain our value propositions to different partners? And these partners, they may or may not be able to work with one another, but we must be able to work with them. So that requires a very deep understanding, which is why we make sure that we regularly send our people overseas. We receive people here so that we have that deep understanding. And it's very important to detect those subtle shifts that happens. And when people start to recalculate their positions, we must be there to know whether there are any shifts. Because if you don't, then your reaction time will be behind the curve.
Right. So in a way, we're almost saying let's keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening all around, and that one way to do that is by continuing to have coffee with each other frequently, so that we remind each other, hey, what are you up to? And those little conversations will
But
help
that's only
in the
the
long
first
run.
step, you see. But the second and very important step is that we must always answer this question: why would anyone want to talk to us unless we are capable unless we are trusted, nobody wants to talk to us. So like, for example, we say that, okay, Steve, why don't we work together on developing some new technologies, or we work together and our forces train together so that we exercise with one another.
But I will look at you and say, which country are you from? Who are you? Why should I work with you?
Precisely. Why should I work with you? What do you bring to the table? If we have nothing that you can bring to the table, and people will just politely tell you that, oh, okay, we'll find a time in our schedule, but it's like sayonara and like, don't come back again. And this is where that consistent investment in defense capabilities comes in. It's not just about the Army, Air Force, Navy, or the DIS. It even includes your defense technology counterparts. So like, for example, just now we talked about drones and counter drones that Tiff talked about. So if now people say that, hey, let's work together to develop some counter drones solutions. So it's like, what do you have for us to play with you? Why should I talk to you?
So what do we have actually? I'm curious.
I'm curious, on a scale of 1 to 10 actually, how 10 being like everybody wants to talk to us, where do we stand?
Oh, well, I won't put a number to it because it's very hard to put a number to it, but I will benchmark ourselves with the following. How many people are we talking to, and how many people are wanting to talk to us? Right.
Okay.
How many?
You certainly cannot count with 2 hands, but it's a healthy number. And it's important that we constantly increase the number of partnerships, because you don't do everything with everyone.
Yes.
But you always find niche things to do with different countries, different armed forces, because they all have unique strengths. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. So we must understand very clearly what are the value propositions that we can bring to the table and where we can partner others. So that's the part about capabilities. But having capabilities doesn't mean that I want to play with you. Because what if you take my capabilities and you leak it to somebody else? Or what if you play with, it's almost like sometimes, what if you want to play with this person and you don't want to play with that person? And you have to manage all these complex dynamics. That's why that very keen understanding is required. And why should I trust Steve, or why should Steve trust me? Unless we have been working together, unless we have been building this relationship together, then I can say that if I share this with you, you will share this with me, and we will not share it with one another.
But I want to go back earlier on to what you say when, like, for example, in this Shangri-La dialogue, you saw the shift between the US and China relations, right? And then you said that different countries started calculating what are we going to do right now. So when we see this sort of like simmering, under like tensions or something like that, what conversations are we also having with our neighbors to make sure that we are all on the same page, that our intentions are not being misread?
So the first thing that we always do is that we compare notes.
Okay.
Because it's very important to check our own blind spots. We might think that, hey, this is actually happening. But is it really happening? And if we just talk amongst ourselves, then we might convince ourselves, this is what they call the echo chamber effect. Oh, yeah, it's right. This is actually happening. But when you look at it from different perspective and you say, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, people might have a slightly different perspective. And then we try to triangulate and ask ourselves, is this really what is really happening? And then after that, then we ask the second order question, which is, if this is indeed what is happening, or if this is our assessment of what's happening, then what's the next thing that we need to do? What do we need to do to make some adjustments to this? For example, when in the past, if the US and the Chinese are at loggerheads over technologies and whatnot, one of the questions that we will have to ask is, how do we sidestep this and don't get caught in between? But when they are working together, then we also have to ask, okay, so which are the areas they are working together that may allow us to make a contribution? But these are just the here and now. We also take a long-term perspective or longer-term perspective to this, because many of these things are subject to the political vagaries of the day. The question is, how do you build a relationship that transcends personality, right? That is more institutionalized, and that goes into a very deep understandings of the other parties, what we call the interests. What are their fears, concerns, and aspirations? What do they really want to do? What they're most concerned about? Because without that deep understanding, then we might be proposing things that people don't value. So, for example, I go up to Steve and say, hey, Steve, why don't we work on satellites together?
Steve's like, I don't care about satellites.
Steve is like, satellites? What satellites, right? or what are you talking about, right? Satellites might be important to you, but satellites might not be important to me. So how do we make sure that for different parties, we have that very sharp and nuanced understanding?
But at the same time, the people will change. The defense ministers will come and go.
Correct.
The politicians will all change, And how do we know that they're all on the same page.
Yes.
We say we're friends, but maybe they're pretending to be friends with some other agenda.
Yeah. So there are a few things that need to happen. So as you mentioned, you can't just depend on one personality. But if the personality, the chemistry works out, you strike while the iron is hot and you try to make further progress. But very importantly, as you have suggested, then you need to institutionalize this. It cannot be just the minister meeting the minister. Are the staff at their different levels meeting one another? Because one of the things that I always advocate is that the younger generation, they must have the chance to grow up together. If you have the chance to grow up together, you understand one another, then as you go through the system, you have a higher chance, not 100%, but at least you got a higher chance that people can work together. So this is why we say that defense is a long cycle, defense diplomacy is a long cycle thing. You cannot just turn up and say that, hey, I want to work with you and please trust me. It's like, on what basis?
I started having this mental picture of a school, right? So all these different classes, everybody is growing up, playing together. But another class, a new teacher comes in, a new leader comes in, and that teacher sets a different agenda for that class. Then what happens after that?
Well, it's a very good analogy because the teacher may set a different agenda and people will adjust and adapt, right? Because that's the adult in the room.
Yeah.
But that relationship between the classmates, those relationships amongst the different classes, I think they will continue to exist and they become a bit of a ballast. So while you have new inputs, you also have a certain stability. So today is very important. So like, for example, whenever there are bilateral issues or multilateral issues, it's not always the minister that will talk first. Very often you have people at the staff level, at the operational level, can pick up a call and say that, hey, what's happening? Because very often what's happened at the political level must coincide with what happens at the operational level. Because you cannot have loose cannon running everywhere, not listening to what the top is saying. Or you can't have the top saying the same thing and then
operationally
people are...
Yeah, but I mean, with politics, that's how it works. You know, there are those conversations, those relationships built. But when it trickles down, so then we ask, what kind of soldiers are we looking at today? Because the soldier will not be making friends with the soldier. He doesn't have that opportunity, not at his level. So he can't build those soft skills. And then should we be training him to still engage in those conversations, or should we be training them to be better with tech because war is not fought with a gun anymore.
So for soldiers, we always have a different set of training, but the philosophy is always the same. Let me touch on where the similarity is. In a lot of militaries, from ancient militaries to now, people have this image that you tell the soldiers what to do. You teach the soldier how to do. But actually, we have always learned from the Germans what we call the Ostra tactic. You don't tell the soldier what to do or how to do per se. That's not the most important. You must tell the soldier why he's doing what he's doing. And I have experienced this myself. So when we give mission orders, you can tell the subordinate commanders, do this, and then they'll just execute.
Right.
But if they don't understand the intent of what you want to do and achieve with your plan, they can't make those adjustments when circumstances change. So this is very fundamental to the training of the SAF soldiers and commanders.
So when I was in NS, I wasn't told the plan. I would just say, just go and run there,
So this is something that we have to keep working on because it is human tendency, not just in the military, but even in the corporate world. People like to tell others, go and get this thing done.
And then we ask why. They will say, don't ask why. Just
don't ask
do
why.
It, right?
So, and especially with a more educated national service armed forces as we have, because we take people from across the entire spectrum of society, I think it's very important for commanders to explain to their people why. But of course, you don't spend a long conference and keep talking about the why and never get to the what and the how. But the second thing, when you go back to what Steve mentioned, there's indeed the skill sets that we need the new generation of servicemen to have will be quite different. Now, it doesn't mean that physical fitness is not important. They are still fundamental because you need to keep healthy, you need to keep active, you need to make sure that you are well adapted to the new environment. But you have new different skill sets. So let me just give some examples. For example, a pilot. In the past, people tend to think about eyesight being the most critical criteria to select a pilot. But today, actually, the most important criteria to select a pilot is your cognitive ability to process huge amount of information, not just the dexterity of your arms. Because today, most of the fights is actually what we say is called the beyond visual range, BVR, beyond visual range fight. You're not trying to look for the plane with your eyeball. Yeah. You are looking at the complex radar systems, all the sensors, not just radars, but all the electronics. And then as you are turning the various Gs, can you still process? I just went to the Air Force school where they did the selection for the pilots to be our pilot trainees. And you look at the battery of tests that they have to go through. It's quite amazing. It's less to do with just eyesight per se, but it has to do with the ability to manage so many complex systems on the fly as you do that. You look at, say, the Army today. In the past, say, artillery. They really need a lot of upper body strength because you need to lift a 42 kilogram round and put it into the barrel. But today, many of these things are mechanized. But in place of that, you have to move at a much faster tempo. Right? In the past, you may say, have one fire mission, and then you take a few hours, and then you go to another mission, and you start to move. There is a certain speed at
and
which
that's
you go.
because we're also we want to fight a war.
Yeah.
Because by the time I see you, it's actually too late.
It's too late already.
You know?
And in
So we wanna
Singapore's
prevent
defense philosophy, I mean, for us, we are so small, right? I always say this, there's no front line, back line. We are all on the line, right? So we are not waiting for people to come here and take us out, and then we try and figure out how to recover from that. And we need to see beyond the horizon, and that requires a lot of cognitive load. You look at the DIS person today. In fact, some of the soldiers that I've met in the...
Sorry, what's DIS?
This is the Digital and Intelligence Service.
Okay.
The fourth service of the SAF. Yes. They are literally on the front line every day.
Yep.
These are the people whom I don't need to tell them, please take your defense seriously because you...
I think they understand the why. They see the why every day.
They see the why every day. So they are just there and they know that every day there are huge amount of attacks that they have to counter. And if they are not alert, something may just get past. So these are people that you don't really have to tell them the why, as Tiffany was saying, because they see it every day. And that's why today we say we are not at war, but neither are we at peace in the conventional sense, because while there's no kinetic actions now, there are a lot of things happening behind the scene. So how do we make sure that a simple thing like our energy supply, the energy cargoes reach our shore safely, our food supplies or our essentials? Well, the Army, Air Force, Navy, the DIS, they have to be all on their toes behind the scene to make sure that nothing happens.
So are we ever ready? Are we always ready at any time? Anything happens? Okay, we're good to go.
This is when he's going to say his message. Yes.
Well, it better be a yes. Come in.
But I will always tell our people, never be complacent. In fact, I will always tell them the answer you should be thinking is no. Because if you think that you are ready, you become complacent.
That's where you have your blind spots, right?
You have your blind spots and you lower your vigilance.
It's a bit like scammers because they play a psychological game more so than But then comes the question, we need to invest in our defense, in our systems. Should we put more money into it or...
No, I think
not say less, but
I think it's traditionally we've always seen military spending on hardware, right?
Yeah.
And it's expensive. Like these are expensive things. But what you've just described sounds like the military of the future is one that is fought on your mobile phones, on your your computers.
That's even more expensive,
even with
right?
drone warfare. No,
it all depends.
They are cheaper, right? I mean, we've seen what has happened. In recent conflicts, a few drones is enough to strike fear. So a lot of warfare is not about what hurts. It's about what hurts internally when your population is
you psychologically
scared. Correct.
Yeah.
So, and these are things that are not that expensive. So how do you justify like big defense spendings when you have a population that maybe is just worried about your everyday, like your cost of living, inflation, and everything?
So the defense spending is a very interesting topic. It's actually both an art and a science. The first guiding principle in defense spending, because we say it's a long-term business, right, is never to have a feast and famine strategy. Some people say, this year I've got a bonus. I go and buy a lot of stuff. But if you don't maintain it, you don't have the capability to maintain it, you are not going to stretch your defense dollar. You will just buy the stuff, you will go and start to degenerate and rot, and then you don't get anything. So the first thing is never have a feast and famine strategy. But the second thing is that the feast and famine strategy is less to do with money and more to do with human capital. Because you can have the money, you can go and buy something, but do you have the technical people that can operate it, that can maintain it? Otherwise, it will become a piece of junk quite soon, quite fast. And the investment in our people is the one that takes many years to build up the technical capabilities to translate it into operational capabilities itself. Then the third thing is that when you buy all this stuff, whether is it expensive stuff like the planes and the tanks, or is it the cheaper stuff like your maybe your IT systems or other things, the question in this is that, will you be held ransom? Is it resilient? For example, you can go and buy a lot of planes, no? But do you have the spares?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have the spares? Because some people buy things very cheaply. It's a bit like what we call in economics the drip pricing.
Yeah.
I sell you the printer very cheaply.
Yeah.
Then after that, the ink cartridge comes
Very expensive.
Very expensive. Then you don't want to be snooked. And you want to stretch your defense dollar, which means that, so from the SAF perspective, and this has been something that has been with me for the last 20, 30 years, we do what we call a life cycle pricing. Mm-hmm. Which means that when we buy something, we don't just commit the funds to buy the upfront cost. Then we have to calculate the entire life cycle cost, including the cost escalation, inflation, and everything. Do we have the real money to make sure that we sustain this capability? Because we need to do justice to what we have and be answerable to Parliament and the people of Singapore. And it'll be irresponsible for us to go and buy something just to show people, but we can't really operate it.
But most funny, imagine if the tank is there and you're like, why is it not moving? Oh, we couldn't pay for the software update. So it's
which is true. Yeah. Then the last thing about this defense budget is very interesting from what you have mentioned. Because today you have what you call these high-end systems. Then you also have this, what we call the low-cost asymmetric system, like the drones or even the software and things like that. Actually, you need a combination of both. And this is what we call a high-low mix. There are a few reasons for this. A lot of people now get very enamored by all these low-cost systems. Yes, they can do many things, but they cannot do all things. Likewise, the high-end system, they can do many things, but they also cannot do all things. So how do you combine the best of both, which means you have the high-end and the low-end? But therein lies a dilemma. The high-end one, you can take it on your National Day parade and show people, and people understand, they count the number of tanks. But when it comes to drones, when it comes to software, it's very hard to do mobile column with a
bunch of guys on their
You have to
computer.
do a heart shape again into the sky.
But this is very important because it goes back to just now what we say. What can you show people that achieve your deterrence message and your confidence building with your own people, but yet not show it so much that it trigger other people to take counter actions?
But do we also look at the people in the region and see what they have?
yeah.
And will
certainly.
that also pressure us in a way to see, maybe they have stepped up on their
he's
drone
got this
stuff.
new plane. I also want.
Yeah, he got the new toy. Now I also have to step up my new toys.
So without naming any particular country or naming any particular system, there was once where people announced that they want to buy something. Then the SAF soon after trotted out the counter to that system.
Okay.
Then people say, wow, so fierce.
Yeah.
People announce they want to buy. Then you all show the counter system. But actually, this is a reflection of the long-term planning required. Because you can't trot out a counter unless you have been quietly working on it for many years. But you also don't want to trot out the counter ahead of time just to show off. So for us, that is really what we really want to achieve is what we call the quiet confidence. You know what you have. Your people know what they have, but we don't have to brag about it. We don't have to trigger other people to do this. And that's why one of my previous permanent secretary used to teach us that. He says that, do you know something? What is success in the SAF? He says when you have designed a capability, you build up the capability, you have operationalized it, you maintain its operational readiness, you never have to use it, you retire it, and nobody knew about it. That is success. So in some sense, and we have many systems in the SAF, in the history of the SAF, that is like that. And to us, that is a bit of a quiet confidence. We don't have to show people everything that we have, but we just need to show enough to tell the potential aggressors, don't try to be funny. But how to now, in this new era, last time it's easy. Show the tanks, show the ships. But now there are things that we spend on that we can't really show and we can't really tell people. Then the question is that if we don't tell people and we don't show people, will people miscalculate? Or will people think that we don't have it and therefore be adventurous?
So sometimes it's a bit like the subtle. People like to post on social media, then they have a passport, then the ticket,
the
but
ticket,
the
the
business
body
card missing out, you know. I'm there but not there, you know.
But then, so what do we do if let's say people don't know that we have these things?
So one of these things is that we have this art of saying that, well, you can show, but most people won't take notice. But what we call the informed observers will take notice. And
so
there
you
are
show
quite
that business class flag in the
just a
top
little
corner of
the blue
picture.
color, you know where
enough
it's from,
for
you know.
you to deduce what
exactly
it is, but without being arrogant, without trying to trigger people. Because you also don't want to give people a reason to start the arms race and say that, oh, you see, they buy this, we must go and buy this. And then that's not going to be very helpful.
Their photo will have first class tickets.
Recently, we talked a little bit about the undersea cables. They carry not just data, but, economic and national security interests. So if these cables and pipelines are everyone's responsibility, how do we ensure that the countries around us share the burden of protecting them? And also, should there come a point where there is conflict that we are not held hostage, like what we see today, like, I'm sorry, you have passed by my area, so if you don't do certain things, I might cut it off.
Yeah. So again, it's a multi-pronged strategy that we need to have. First, at one level, you need to have what we call like-minded countries to come together and say that, let's have some very clear rules. Okay. Who has the right to do what for those undersea critical infrastructure? Who has the right of jurisdiction, how to protect them? So that's one set of things. Second set of things, of course, you try your best to protect them from disruption, because the attack on one part of the system is actually an attack on the whole system. So again, you need to work with people to develop real capabilities to protect them, whether it is a cyber infrastructure or is it the energy infrastructure and so forth. But the third thing that we must always do is that you must always diversify. Never be held ransom. But this is actually age-old dictum that has been taught to us since 1965. And this was keenly brought home. The lesson was brought home again during COVID. I always have this rule when I was in MTI. Never depend on one source for more than 1/3 of your supply. That's a rule of thumb. It doesn't mean that you can't cross 1/3, but if you ever cross 1/3, then better think carefully what are the other mitigating measures that you can have. Because exactly as you mentioned, you don't want to be held ransom. And today, people can hold you ransom because of the supply chain. People can hold you ransom by geography.
Right.
That is why in the military, when we build up systems, we always have a multiple solutions for one particular problem. Because you never know whether that one thing will work. And you always have a backup. And you must exercise the backup. And backup costs money. You don't think that there's a theoretical backup, and then when you really need it and you press the button, it doesn't work, then you are in a trouble, right? And certain systems, you cannot really allow it to fail. And you always have to ask, what if the primary plan fail? Because in Singapore, we don't have that margin of error for us to try to recover from some of these catastrophic attacks or shocks, right? So that's why we have always to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that things don't fail? That's why in the SAF day, I use what one of my previous Chief Defence Force reminded me in the 1990s. He always have this saying. He says that, the SAF has to get it right first time, every time, all the time. Whereas the adversary just need to get it right one time, anytime. And that's the asymmetry. And that's why it takes a lot of effort for us to look normal, because behind every normal day is an extraordinary day for many other people behind the scene.
So are we diversified enough to ensure that we will never be held ransom to anyone?
And my answer will always be that it's never enough, because you will constantly look at it. Because every time you fix one gap, you will think about what's the next gap. And it's our job to worry ahead of time and always think where we may be short. This is something I think we have to have it in our DNA to never be complacent, to think that we got it all covered. Because the day we think that we got it all covered, we start relaxing, and then our minds are not working.
Let's talk about manpower, because we know that is one of the issues we face here in Singapore. We have a population getting smaller. Fertility rates are down, and we know the physical employment standard, PES status for soldiers will be changed in October 2027. So this change, is it because of a manpower shortage? Is that why we're sort of opening up a bit more?
No. You see, the SAF has the privilege of being a conscript armed force. Why I say privilege? We can plan our manpower 20 years ahead. We are not like some other armed forces where, this year I can't recruit enough people. So I have always told the SAF this very simple truth. You know how many people are coming in 18 years later. You better start preparing your operational concepts 18 years ahead. If you need more money to buy certain technology to overcome a manpower deficit, then you either change your operational concept or you change the technology that you use in order to achieve the mission. Understand the why. And basically, in short, we have to cut the coat to our cloth. And that is evergreen philosophy of how we build the SAM. But why do we want to do all this adjustment? Is because whatever finite number of people that we have, we want our people to feel engaged, to understand the why. But in order for them to do so, they must feel that they have agency, they are able to contribute according to what they can and what they want. Now, what they can contribute must be defined dynamically because the nature of warfare has changed. In the past, I don't know, maybe if you are infantry, your marching speed, your running speed is very important, your artillery, your upper body strength is very important. But today, you have technology, your infantry, your artillery, or even your cyber space people, the DIS people, they all have different skill sets. So that's one. So the way that we can allow people to contribute has changed quite a lot, right? So if we have a one-size-fits-all, very blunt instrument, you don't actually allow our people to contribute to the best of their abilities. And if you don't allow our people to contribute to the best of their ability, you will never win over their commitment. Because I want to feel that I'm contributing. Yes, everybody can complain about having to serve NS and whatnot, but everybody will say that if I have to serve, I want to make sure that I make the best use of my time. I can do something meaningful, I can contribute something meaningful. So that's very important. So this is why we have adjusted the way we not only do the medical classification system, but also where we assign people. Yep. Now, in the past, there's no such thing as a Steve, where do you want to go? Army, Air Force, Navy, or police.
I didn't have a choice.
You didn't have a choice. You just, Steve, you just go there, right? Tiffany, you just go there. But now we tell people, okay, this is medically, this is what you can do. But we also want to know, what do you want to do? Now, it doesn't mean that you get 100%
balance. Boss, I want to.
It doesn't mean that you can do that, but at least we find a better match, right? So some people feel that I want to learn something here, I want to contribute something here. You try to have a better match. And if we can do that, then I think we strengthen the commitment to defense. Then the other thing that I think has changed is that last time, we have this system where you go for some medical classification system, right? Then as if it won't change for the rest of your life. You are on the same.
You are stuck in that,
right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you might have a previous injury. At that point in time, you cannot do certain things, but people do recover from their injuries, right? Some of our best sportsmen are the fittest people in Singapore, right? But then they get downgraded to a certain PAS, which says that because of a previous injury. And the other thing is that people also acquire skill sets. I don't know, if ever we go into operations, the information operation is very important. People like Tiffany, yourself, will be very valuable to the armed forces operations because you help us to communicate what's out there, whether is it man or woman. So I think there's scope for us to broaden the definition of what people can contribute and have a much more dynamic system of matching people's capabilities and desire to what they really want to do.
So will we at some point also adjust the period of how long national service is served? I mean, because
they've already shortened it to 2 years. I did 2.5 years.
But then, I mean, I was listening to this entire conversation and thinking to myself, but you know, the soldier of the future needs to have high cognitive abilities, which I would argue the current generation can deal with a ton of information.
Because they always multitask.
Exactly. And then know how to fly drone. I mean, a lot of them, they already know how to fly drone with Call of Duty. They are already playing it when they are 11. By the time they are 15, they are well versed in it already. And so in that case, like, will we at some point reconsider the length of national service?
You're thinking of your son, your children.
I know, because they received the letters.
So the length of our national service is actually determined by a few factors. One is, of course, the training. So the training, you're right, as what Tiffany said, some of the things they already know before they come in today. So we don't have to spend so much time. But there are some more things that they need to train, which is harder than what previous generations may have. For example, while we say we are now operating in a more decentralized fashion, you need much more leadership in the decentralized unit. You need to be able to integrate a much more fluid, many more complex and diverse unit in a fluid manner. So that also takes up time. But that is only the training time required. The other thing that determines our national service length, both in NSF and NS, is actually how many units do we need for operations. Because unlike other countries whereby they do national service and then they put into these general black box reserves, we don't put our NS men into this black box as if we won't call them up or we call them up to do random things. They are all put into operational units, and Steve will be familiar with this. When you go back, you actually work with people whom you work with, and they are operationally ready fighting units. And that also requires time for them to gel together, to work together. So we are constantly reviewing how we train our people so that we are much more effective. But at the same time, now we are getting complaints from some NS men that our training is too fast-paced,
really?
too optimized, because it's not a frivolous complaint, because people do need time to recover. People do need time to, whether is it cognitively or whether is it physically, you don't want to cram everything into it and then people have no time to recover. So that's one. But the other thing, I think what Tiffany has mentioned is that we are also looking at how to broaden the ability of many more people to contribute to defense. So for example, some people have not have the chance to serve NS. Maybe some of them are females, maybe some of them are new citizens. But we are going to expand the SAF volunteer corps. We're going to expand the volunteer network, because I think many, including the females and the new citizens, they want to feel that sense of being able to contribute to defense.
Right.
And they may not do what the enlisted NS men have done, but they can contribute in many ways. So for example, many of the women, some of them, including media personalities, they say, can I help you with your info operations?
Right.
Some of the lawyers, doctors, they have specialized skill sets, and they say, can I help you to do this? But there are also some people who say that, hey, I'm a doctor and a lawyer. I want to serve the SAF, but I don't want to do doctor and lawyer work. I just want a break. And there are also people like that, and they end up doing, for us, to look at the command and control systems, the logistics, and many other things. So different strokes for different folks, but it allows them to have a sense of camaraderie, the sense of solidarity of having served national service in some way, form or the other.
I mean, if you think about it, if something ever happens in this country, I mean, we will all stop our day jobs and want to be able to contribute to the community to help take care of each other, right? So there's so many things that we can do. And I guess you're saying if there is some kind of preparation, some kind of for people to identify with, to say, I want to be empowered to be able to do something in that situation. You know?
So I give an example. You see, I have this idea of these concentric circles. You see, at the core, on day-to-day basis, we have perhaps 50,000 conscript doing their operational duties, training. But that's only the inner core, what we call the high readiness core. Then we have 250,000 NS men. If we press the button, they will mobilize. But actually, many people forget that we have another 750,000 ex-NS men. As Steve said, if something happens, I'm sure, even if not 100%, a high proportion of them will say, can I pick up a rifle and do something again?
Right.
And then the question is, how do we get this, what we call the NS alumni, because even inspiring the next generation and to share with them some of their own operational experiences that we cannot do so publicly, those are important things. Then what about the next circle of support, which is the families, the sisters, the mothers, as many of them may also want to do something in different parts of the total defense spectrum. Or then what about the employers? Right? So there are different circles of people whom we need to engage, which is why MINDEF is leaning forward to say that let's change our concept of who we think we need to engage. It's not just that 250,000 NS men and NSF who are serving their operational duties now. There's actually a whole support network that's important. And that is also why it's so important for us to make available the opportunities.
Right.
Well, I think we covered a lot of ground today. We went from macro, global picture, defense spending, and then at the heart of it is what Singaporeans want to know is how will our military look like in the future?
I think it will keep evolving. Good news. I mean, the good news is it sounds like we're always looking ahead to say what could happen and how can we keep ourselves safe. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Minister.
Thank you so much. It was a joy talking to the two of you.
So you've heard from Minister there. There's so many things we can look at, and it sounds like at the end of it, we all have a role to play. So I guess that's where we got to say, how much of a role do you want to play and be part of this? On that note, this is it for Deep Dive. We'll see you again next week. Bye for now.
See you.
Take care.